participatory research tools and talking about the entire soul and spirit of participation. So many times it may sound very obvious, but is this theme a neglected one? Probably, at least if I take case of India, much neglected, how we use symbols and pictures vis-à-vis the participatory research. Even though it is a common practice, this influences a lot. This is one of the very real turning points in my life, whether in a dilemma to earn money or to have a meaningful life working with the deprived population. So one picture, one symbol can really change our entire life, our outlook, our perspective towards our future as well. But is this sufficiently utilized in research? A similar analogy goes when people describe our sector. A monk may retire, but people like us who are a social work profession may never retire. That zeal, passion really keeps on pushing us throughout our life. So basic objective of this session is I won't be talking about numbers. I'll be mainly talking about the entire process of utilizing these participatory research tools and some of the innovations that we have tried and the learnings we could generate through the entire process. Focus is of course the vulnerable populations, the poor, the deprived, marginalized sections and the PRPs, but in the innovations context. And the main thing is how we inculcate this culture of innovation. It can't be a very automatic process. It has to be a very conscious scientific process, and what we are doing towards that to share our learnings. What I certainly don't intend to do is state something very obvious, importance of participation, etc., etc. So I'll go one step further, presuming that as a common platform for us. I'll be building basically on the three researches my team has conducted. So one was we conducted for United Nations Population Fund agency that specialization in women and girls reproductive health and health issues. So for them we conducted impact assessment of one of their major programs in India called Adolescent Friendly Health Clinics. The second one we conducted for Government of India, which was about management and maintenance of tenements. So when slums get developed, those slums get transferred into the vertical building structures. But what happens next? And this has been either to a neglected aspect. So Government of India wanted to develop this as a very systematic knowledge, a systematic science in itself. So we tried to have our contribution, our humble contributions to this. The third aspect, third research we are interested with was again by Government of India for the policy input, that what really happens together of government schemes on field and what policy implications are emerging through that entire experience. The reason for selecting these three researches for today's discussion, one is obvious, there were certain innovations that we tried and we had our own learning generating out of it. The second one, they represent a great degree of diversity in what they refer to. So there is diversity in terms of research theme, the stages in which we try to adopt research, history of the theme, etc. But I will refer this more at the end part of it, whereby I like to narrate our own endeavors to how we are trying to convert this entire theme of innovations for research into a scientific body of knowledge. So one project research refers to an analysis of project, impact assessment of project. Another one refers to a program, thereby a combined effect of various poverty alleviation projects together, what they really work as. And the third one is very new phenomenon, a process of slums redevelopment and what happens next. The nature of research, of course, it varies. Whereby in one we were interested with developing a new body of knowledge. In another one it was about identifying parameters, barriers, etc. Another reason for selecting these three researches, there is this entire range of co-production partners, whereby working primarily with primary stakeholders, with government agencies and other agencies. So how this entirety comes together and gives us a synergistic effect to give a holistic approach to research. This really leads us to two fundamental issues. The first fundamental issue is when we talk about participatory research with the vulnerable populations, are they just subjects of research? or are they co-researchers? They are partners in research, and how we perceive their participation. So can we take a very ready-made frame to them and they say that now invite them to participate, or can they be involved in the process right from the word go? The second crucial issue for us is a research end in itself. So what is the rise of death rate of research? So once I conduct a research, submit a report, especially when I am working with vulnerable population, when I am working with nomadic tribes with just 1% of literacy or n number of poverty domains. Is a research end in itself, or is a researcher sensitive to taking the process further in terms of developing actionable tools as an outfall of that research? If I go to the first research, it was about impact assessment of this adolescent friendly health clinics. I won't be going into numbers of sample size, etc., because I wish to today focus on the phenomenon, the process part of it, and our learnings as well. We involve good degree of participatory research tools. Certain innovations that we used was, of course, gender segregated focus group discussion, whereby till that time adolescent girls and boys were not identified as the primary stakeholders. But in research design, actually to identify even the parameters for research, we took their participation. So firstly, for identification of parameters, their involvement can be of great use. The research had actually two facets. One is talking about the impact of the scheme. The second thing we superimposed on the research was envisioning with those adolescent girls and boys that how they perceive the entire future through this project and what are their other needs. This really led us to a very interesting kind of thing. Most of these parameters are identified by those adolescent girls and boys. Of course, there has to be an expert facilitation to the entire process. So some of the points, if they are missed, they are added. But apart from that, the prioritization of these parameters is based on what they have done. And there is a distinct difference, what we love to call this a gender diversity analysis, that how those adolescent girls look at it and adolescent boys look at it. And then plotting this, capturing this into different forms which can be very catchy for the clientele, for the primary stakeholders. So it had two sets. One is about the impacts of the scheme and what needs to be done in future. This led us to this very interesting thing about gender diversity analysis, whereby we tried to capture that in terms of these kind of kits. Now we clear-cut had a choice that to make it as complicated as possible so that I may look intelligent, which I am certainly not. So I can make it as complicated as possible, or on the other side make it as simple as possible. So trying to plot these parameters in terms of, and then using some of the innovative picture presentations for that, and whereby how a girl feels, the ranking by girls and ranking by boys, and comparative analysis of it. Now the situations could be different. It could be different in Thailand, it could be different in Sweden, but the process for us is very important. The message is very crucial, that the primary stakeholders being co-researchers with us. Very interestingly, UNFPA liked this idea very much, and then we developed this kind of portable kit for them. Now, this is how a research can take the process further for the sustainability of the cause, whereby we converted this into a portable resource kit, whereby all the charts go together, get translated to local languages, and this becomes a sensitization kit. But not only for adolescent population, it's for the local government, the departments, ministries which work with them. So can we identify the issues adolescent in a different way with their own participation? If I can quickly move on to the next research which we conducted for Government of India, develop a new body of knowledge. Again, talking about redeveloped slums. There can be a presumption that experts and researchers know everything and go with a ready-made frame of reference, ready-made frame of research, and have their participation in that. But especially as this was to be developed as a new scientific body of knowledge, the thing we preferred to do was try to understand life from their own perspective. And remember, there is this entire bandwidth of literacy with this community. Very lowly illiterate or a moderate scale of literacy. So it can't be generalized per se. What we tried to do with them, when the parameters were identified, of course with a bit of expert facilitation as well wherever needed, those parameters were converted into symbols. Symbols which can be easily identified. And then subsequently there was a validation process, whereby whether those symbols mean the same thing for the community, redeveloped slum community in India. Now, any illiterate man or woman can participate in this entire process. The research could have been ended there, but our preference was to end this with a usable, an actionable kind of framework. So, the research had an element of self-assessment, whereby various parameters of slums redevelopment identified, converted into various symbols. There is a science of these colors as well. These are called Disney colors. So even though we talk about issues of poverty, unhygiene, etc., when they get these kind of colors, the Disney colors, the entire outlook becomes different. It actually encourages the community to participate in the entire process. Again, the kind of modus operandi used is very simple, the signal principle, whereby for each, and remember this research was done by the community itself, whereby they say that in our conditions, the condition is good, so green, bad is red, and something in between orange. The story won't end there. There will be a kind of analysis of why the community feels so in their own words. One part. The next part we wanted to have this as an actionable, a planning tool as well. So the last part refers to what we wish to do in future. Again, there was very specific need by the community on this count that the one set was the community in general and the other set was community representative, the community office bearers who take care of their day-to-day functioning. So the planning with community office bearers, you can see the matrix is a bit complex than the earlier one. So this was our effort to develop something different, and this has clicked. This has been there has been a good response by the communities to this. Actually, a paper by me and my colleague was invited by Government of India, a publication, a policy publication which gets published once in 5 years in collaboration with Oxford University Press. So paper on this was published in that. I'm purposely moving a bit fast so that the rest of the aspects could be covered.
Don't be stressed. I will do my 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And you
this,
can add a couple.
It's not moving further. That's why yep. The other thing is packaging this into again similar portable kits, getting it translated into various languages and which can be used by the local communities from various parts of India. So this has been another innovation whereby we package it into a form which can be used, which can be transported, which can act as a portable resource kit, IEC kit, exhibition kit. For us, the important learning was this process enhanced community ownership of this entire process a lot. There was a huge belief in their ownership. There was an increased sense of accountability because they were participants in the research. The parameters, the assessment, the planning was done by themselves. So actually research has led to something very concrete in future for them. The third research I am referring to is again supported by Government of India, talking about entire poverty alleviation program comprised by various poverty alleviation projects in the city of Maharashtra and what really happens. I just focus on the significant parts of the entire process. The real fun of the entire thing was multifactorial analysis. It's a very complex community, But what we were trying to focus on was the most deprived population. So you might be aware about the caste system in India. So trying to have those slums covered in which there is high proportion of scheduled caste population was the first parameter. And then trying to do comparative analysis of various aspects. But the real core of trying to understand access to various basic services of the poor population in that specific city, and to what extent government current programs and schemes are effective on that ground. This actually led us to very refined understanding of some of the multi-layered stratification within the communities. For example, a kind of slum and non-slum comparison within the city. Even within slums, there is this classification called notified slums and non-notified slums. Now, notified slums are those which are recognized by the urban local body, and non-notified slums are not recognized. But in context of India, in some of the states like Maharashtra, the state where I belong, it makes a huge difference. Because in Maharashtra, it is not mandatory for the local bodies to provide basic services to non-notified slums. So it has a huge impact on health, especially reproductive health of women and girls. And then what we can do about it. So this became a very important policy persuasion tool for us, policy analysis tool for us. Another aspect, it was the thing unearthed by this research was the entire gamut of financial needs, and very shockingly, very surprisingly, but the interest rate for those poor from private money lenders is very high. It's 5 to 10% per month. So if you take it to the annual level, it's 60% to 120%. Absolutely exploitative. So sometimes with one marriage, almost one entire generation or two generations, they go in indebtedness. And then we try to analyze this phenomenon, and then how microfinancing institutions can play a role in that. But at every stage, the very important part was gender segregated analysis. How women see the same phenomenon differently than men, and what could be the reason for that. So building on these learnings, the key learnings for us is, yes, those participatory research tools, they are not just children's game. They have application in very wide range of situations. Also, use of PRTS actually generated very crucial policy implications for us, which had implication for India, but has implication for many other developing countries' context too. How we utilized this learning. So I just talked about 3 researches. Actually, we are utilizing this as a kind of institutional culture, whereby this becomes a consistent, vibrant software for us, this kind of thinking of innovations in social work. So this has led to identify from one of the key issues that making men responsible for women's health. Take case of India, whereby we talk about global gender gap report. It ranks India second last on women's health count. The recent gender gap report talks about India ranking as 134 out of 135 countries. So surely very huge degree of anemia. When in case of nomadic tribes or other cases, they say that it's almost 90%. Not our figures, the formal documents talk about it. So it's high time that men should take responsibility of women's health, maybe direct or indirect, adopting the population control measures like non-scale vasectomy, etc. I'm very happy to announce that we'll be launching this global movement at the hands of Honorable Country Representative of UNFPA India on 24th of this month. So we look at this as a global movement, but unless if we didn't have the scientific framework, a scientific temperament of looking at the innovations in social work research, probably we couldn't have identified this theme. Or some of the aspects whereby I go to the science of it, how we are trying to see this entire innovations as a scientific process. We try to see this as a combination of various overlapping matrices. So one is participation matrix, Then gender matrices, in which we have two kinds of matrices, and the process runs further. In participation matrix, when we start discussing about any research, we just try to see that in which stages of the research and in which form we can have community participation and very meaningful community participation. In gender matrices, the first matrix talks about participation of women and very importantly adolescent girls. When we talk about gender issues, by and large we talk about women, but our experience shows that adolescent girls are much more vulnerable in the entire current social context. So we have identified, we have now started classifying this into two parts, women and adolescent girls. So where we can have for women and adolescent girls, where we can have their participation and in which form. The second part is, of course, making the other stakeholders responsible for gender issues. It's talking about, when we talk about gender issues, it's not just branded as women's issues. It's about the entire fraternity. So the key concern is how we make men, adolescent boys or others equally responsible for gender equality, empowerment, etc. But again, the thing I need to remind you is, it has to be a very conscious process. We can't expect this to happen automatically. And then trying to do it phase wise, pre-research, research, and the sustainability part, post-research. What we do in this research, innovations with respect to co-partners, co-production partners, various vulnerability situations. And then there can be innovations in how we articulate the same phenomenon. As it can happen for any country, if I talk about the huge scale of numbers in India, people here can get shocked. But maybe in India, the crowd, the population is day-to-day kind of thing. But when we say that, when we talk about slum dweller population in India only, it's more than the population of 192 countries on this earth. When we talk about the nomadic tribes population with just 1% literacy, 110 million, it's more than the population of 202 countries. This kind of comparative analysis gives a very different insight. And quickly run through some of the things because I wish to focus on the last part, how it enhanced our understanding of gender issues. This entire process actually made us realize that we need to have a dedicated institutional entity for working on the issues of women in deprivation. And thanks to the MDH team here giving their visit to us in February this year, we could launch this International Center for Women in Deprivation. And there are a number of issues we could identify and try to handle them in very innovative way. One of them is a tool called 24-hour clock, and then understanding comparative gender roles and responsibilities and what it implies for a woman's health, her status, etc. This led us to emergence of this very crucial thing of appropriate technologies for women in deprivation, whereby we could identify avenues of gender gap with respect to the technologies used. So use of various agricultural technologies, their development was predominantly male dominated. So this is a major thing we are currently working on. So just run through some of these examples. I am almost through this. We could identify some of the very simple measures. Now this is a traditional sickle with a horizontal blade. Again, the innovations process made us realize that poorest of the poor women are involved in this cause. Can we make it something different? Actually, doing agricultural operation, it really injures their hand, bruises hair. So we gave a small bend to their sickle. It improved their health a lot because there is now, this has to be done in squatting posture. With a bit of degree correction in their bending, it reduced stress on their vertebral column, etc. So it worked wonders. A small intervention. The thing I wish to emphasize here is this can't be a very taken for granted process. It has to be a conscious process. One of the ways we adopted is what we call a learnings workshop, whereby our project review workshops are not just about numbers. The way we articulate it is what kind of learnings we are generating, and then to address those learnings, which kind of innovations we can have. So it's not just applicable for research project, but all kinds of project we try to utilize this. But this is we are trying to develop a science of its own. This is a great learning platform for us also, listening to other speakers and understanding from their experiences. So a bit of look of how we are trying to inculcate this learning culture for us in support of innovation. Thanks.
As part of the learning process, we need some time for questions. So please come forward with questions.
Maybe basic question, but for how long have you been doing this?
For last around more than 5 years, we would say. Yeah.
So any mistakes you learned from, or what did you start and develop?
Yeah, there have been good number of challenges, I would say, because firstly, countries like India offer so much of diversity. So the persons who are involved in the entire process need to have real participatory approach. Otherwise, we'll go to that slide number 2, whereby participation can take various forms, driven participation, etc., etc. So developing that kind of capacities within the team is a very crucial factor, and that's why we have developed our own kind of curriculum, I would say, that even for our team members, it becomes very important capacity building activity, talking about participation and then putting in your thoughts on participation. But any new entrant to our team goes through a very rigorous process. So to ensure those that kind of participatory skills and attitude becomes very crucial. For example, when we work with nomadic tribes, it need not be presumed that as they have only 1% literacy, they are nattus, they don't know anything. But actually, we have so many things to learn from them, because despite all branding of as criminals, all issues in their life, as they have survived through generations and centuries, I have to learn a lot from them. Or when we ask our team members working with the tribals, the first thing we emphasize that very important thing to learn from tribals is gender equality. In India, the so-called educated communities have dowry system. It's money goes from girls' place to boys' place. But in all tribal communities, it goes the other way around. Boy has to pay for girl, which we call a pure economics of labor. So one very important thing and very difficult to inculcate, if somebody goes with a very typical urban and urban view of me being educated and having so many degrees with me, PhDs and whatnot, and then presuming a kind of super place for myself. So actually that entire demystification is very much needed to respect the community and inculcating a true spirit of participation. But with greater exposure with the field, we realize that it really works when somebody goes face to face with the reality.
I have a very concrete question. Could you hold up one of the cards there and just slowly? How would you ask the question to the people using the picture? How would you ask the question?
Yeah. Firstly, now this question is not asked by us, but by the community facilitator, who is one of them, and usually a woman.
So how would you ask the question?
So the person talks about whether, a very simple question, whether there is this concept called MMT operating manual, whether this manual is developed within your community or not, and whether you are aware about it. And whether if the community says, no, it's not at all there, it gets ticked as red. And that's why we understand it thoroughly. It's developed, it's with us, and we understand thoroughly, it gets ticked as green.